Good. Okay. I think then most of us are here tonight because we're really excited about what is happening right now in the world of healthy food systems. And I say excited because actually at the same time we're also pretty distressed by some of the things that are in motion at the moment. So it's always great to come together with other advocates of growing food because we are making the small changes that up to larger systemic change. We don't feel it at the time when we're taking our individual steps, but it's the fact that we're doing it collectively. Okay, enough editorializing. So, um, we've been doing advocacy work for years, but right now we are in a particular moment, and so I thought it would be a good idea to just review what that moment is, so that will help us think through. We are going to also um, toss out some ideas for actions. Then we want to give some time for Jessey to share some of the work that he's doing, both in terms of the farming, but also the letter to Olivia Chow and the responses, and where do we go from here with that. And then we'll come back to have a discussion about what does this mean for us, and what kind of tangible actions can we take over the next year. So, and then, we're going to have a little bit of time until we do the breakout groups. But if people want to continue to have the conversation, we'll continue to have space to do that. So, whatever time you need to have. So, first of all, nationally, globally, right now in Canada, there's a huge reaction to tariffs coming from the US. And it's prompting people to think about buying local and buying local food. Folks who maybe weren't paying so much attention to that before. So it's a great moment for that conversation. We're also in the midst of an Ontario election that's going to happen in a few days from now. Sustain is a network working on the Ontario scale. They've put together a food platform that you may find interesting to look at beyond the election. Uh, so that link is there. TUG has been doing a campaign since last fall. Um, we talk all the time about all the barriers that people encounter, and wouldn't it be great if the city would stop putting out policy that is creating barriers? Let's have some enabling policy. Let's have more support for urban agriculture. But how are we going to get that if we don't have people inside the city who are mandated to do that work? So we've come up with a little campaign articulating that. There were about 148 people who signed our petition. And since we've done that, I've thought a little bit about, um, what do we learn from that campaign? And I think some of the work that we've been doing has been with our city contacts to try and find a home for this staff person. Is this someone who should be housed in SDFA where they're doing the anti-poverty work? These are the folks who are kind of carrying the torch for food since the closure of the Toronto Food Policy Council. Are they the ones to take this forward now? Environment, climate, and forestry has done a lot of supportive work around urban agriculture, perhaps because we want to emphasize how much climate change and food are intersecting and how much urban agriculture can help the fight against climate change. Maybe that's a place to have a home for someone. There have been some changes at the Economic Development Division lately that they're suggesting that maybe there's some support for food work there. So trying to find where that home is for a staff person has taken up a bit of the conversation. We still don't have an answer to that. And in the meantime, all of this other stuff has kind of rolled forward. So I think it would have been useful to do that internal work before we started the campaign, because we went to councillors and didn't actually have anything for them to act on. And don't get me wrong, I want people to be talking up food to their councillors all the time, even if there isn't a specific ask. They still need to hear that it's important to people. but to get them to actually take a step, they need to have something solid to work on, and to ask for a more tangible result than just a staff person. And that was Olivia Chow who got me thinking of that, because she is now pushing, and this is the next piece here. She's now pushing for school food programs with very specific timelines, and that's an accomplishable goal. It's something that she will leave as a legacy. So the staff that were working on the food charter, which was done in conjunction with Food Share, I've now been pulled off that. That's been put aside for now, because now they're focusing on rolling out these school food programs. And there's a lot of opportunity within those school food programs for a couple of reasons. One, time to push local food procurement. If we're going to be if the city's going to be buying food to give to kids, why not support local farmers, and why not support urban growers? The second one that's could be interesting is schools have lots of property around them. They already have community gardens. Why not open some space for urban farmers to grow food that they can sell to schools? So that's something really like focused and doable, achievable, lots of work, but it can be done. So there's real possibility there. The other thing that is coming up, and thank you, Ali, for bringing this forward. You've been following this issue for at least a couple of years. There is some proposed amendments to zoning bylaws. We've been waiting for this for so long. That will now allow market gardens on residential properties, so expanding the number of places where you can grow food. It is not passed quite yet. There is a draft of the bylaw. It went to council. It was referred back to staff for consultations. So the good news is that that gives us some time, like until next fall, to mobilize our community and get them to support this bylaw change. So we can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but it is a chance for us to show how important food is to councillors, to city staff, to show that our community will get out and mobilize for something to change. And the last one I have up here is that Eileen de Villa was our former medical officer of health. She left at the end of December. There's a new person. The Board of Health is the body that was responsible for the Toronto Food Policy Council, the Toronto Food Strategy. Under the last few years, all of the support for food policy work was decimated. It's gone. Maybe now that we have new leadership there, this is an opportunity to try and bring some support back again for food from a health perspective. So new moment. Okay, so that's all the context stuff. Avenues for action. So these are things I want you to think about as we're continuing the conversation with Jessey. So I kind of already talked about school food gardens and the two opportunities there. City staff are working on this right now. If we can get them research, if we can give them examples that show that this kind of system has worked in other places, it will help them make the case. So that's a specific piece of work we can do. When the consultations around the zoning bylaws come, we can participate in that. We can reach out to the chair and councillors on the Board of Health to say, will the new leadership support food? The emergency declaration, I think I skipped past that. City of Toronto and 3 other cities in Ontario have now declared that food insecurity is an emergency, the same way that if there were floods or COVID or whatever, this gives them some more tools to respond to the issue, but it also gives us a really good communication piece. So let's use that. Anytime that we're talking to councillors, we're talking to city staff, it's like, food insecurity is an emergency. This is now official. So we need to take some action. And how are they supporting it? Last question for you is, how do we best use Urban Agriculture Week? It's always meant to be a platform for telling the story of urban ag. How do we use it to the best advantage? And that's where I stop and I say, hello, Jessey. Are you here? Did you ride out the long conversation?
I am here.
Okay, thank you so much for being here tonight, Jesse, and thank you for the inspiring work you do on your farms, but also this letter that you've written to Olivia Chow. So we asked you if you would come and talk about your farm work first, because I think not everybody knows specifically about the Many Hands Collective, but then also to give you some time to talk about what you would like to engage our community in.
Yes. Thank you again for this incredible opportunity to share my journey into urban ag. As most of you know, this was not a call, something I wanted to do. I did not come into urban farming with any training, any formal training at all. This was a shift in my life trajectory career-wise, and it has been a calling and a thirst that I cannot quench. And every step of the way, new doors and new opportunities come in. And the biggest thing for me is to see how we can get to the true experience of food resilience. What would that look like? It's not a immediate answer to whatever we're doing right now, or whatever I'm doing right now is not an immediate answer, but in future tense, in the generations of us, of our future selves, it'd be good for them to look back and say, at this point in time, these individuals did and started something that we are now able to have strong sense of access to food and a strong local economy. So Zawadi, as it started, was a simple backyard project. I remember the first time I built my greenhouse. Before I continue, Veronda, how much time do I have? Make sure I don't skip over.
10, 15 minutes, maybe. So we
10,
have time
15 minutes. Okay.
for discussion. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll be quick. So Zawadi started simply as a backyard project, and we've scaled now to work at Downsview Park. And we work on three major challenges. Zawadi works on three major challenges. The first one is, how do we develop and create room for stewards? So stewards are individuals who know and can learn how to be individuals who can take care and support and protect and care for land. What is that? How do we develop that? So having a project like Homestead Toronto is a great tool for us to use that. So when anyone comes in who doesn't know what to do anything, Homestead will get them from zero to growing to whatever capacity they can be, either growing small scale backyard, rooftop, whatever it is, or to my scale of growing. They will learn how the nuances of that. The second challenge we take on is land. Land is a big issue in urban ag. As Zawadi started off, like I said, was simply just working on backyards, but the exposure to backyards, if I can give you a context, we focus solely on soil. We build the soil and work on the soil to make sure the soil gets to a point of fertility that it develops well, because the crops that come from there, we call them derivatives. So good soil, good crop, bad soil, bad crop. So keeping up with that is an investment, and you have to understand that we work with what we call etobicoke clay. If you ever understood what that is, you'll understand it's literally a brick that you have to nurture and build for it to have at least some sense of depth to grow any type of food you want. So that's a big challenge, is not just the land and the soil, but accessibility. So the problem with urban ag for us is the lands that we have that we do not control, meaning the people who have the leases, they control the ownership, they can turn around and just take the land back from you. We've had that happen for us multiple times. And if you know how much life it takes just to create good soil, we lose out on that. So land is a big key factor with that. And now bring the back, we're talking to the many hands. So many hands here is where it comes to play, because we were very fortunate to have an incredible conversation with Fresh City, leaving the project and then leaving us on the table with Canada Lands Company to be able to take on a significant land piece in Downsview Park, which will help bring up to speed to what the growing capacity is. If you saw the before picture of the photo that's on that website, you will laugh. In fact, Ron, I think we should have a before and after picture to show you the economy of the two spaces. We were given the truest sense of etopical clay. It was literally brick. You could break with a hammer. And we were given the project land access in May, while we had CSA obligations that started in June. So it was all hands on deck to build it. So it was such a difficult, yet we were able to bring it up to speed and still working on soil. So access to land is a huge thing, and I'll come back to that with the is point number 2 in my proposal to the city, is we need to have that. The other challenge is the accessibility of the food being developed. Yes, you have the stewards. Yes, you have the land, but then you have an issue of where the food actually goes. So when it comes to the school programs, and it's come to many other projects across the city, whatever food we create in our city does not permeate where it needs to go. And that was a get-go problem that we saw right from the beginning, even with Food Share Toronto that I partnered with. Even going to Toronto Community Housing to bring our food in there, there are incredible political barriers that we could not cross. And even after COVID happened, we could not go back into those spaces. So with this aspect of that, we're seeing the degrading aspect of even just, to my fourth point in this, was the food infrastructure. We are not invited to the table of these conversations. And when you hear this food insecurity, you kind of wonder how they arrived to it. If many of us, I'm only 9 years old, by the way, farming in Toronto. I'm sure many of you have been farming circles around me for much longer time, and you could teach me a thing or two, and you've learned more than I've, you've learned so much. So I'm humbly here to say thank you for the opportunity, and I really want to carry this conversation forward. But these elements for me are problematic because it feels as if the city is moving to one direction while we are left sitting wondering what direction they're going, and we're not invited to the table to join these conversations. And when they act on saying these things, those funds that are allocated and developed and passed, we don't get to be part of that conversation at all. And then we just left on the wayside. And the communities that we see that are the ones struggling, they get to have third, fourth, fifth grade quality of food. Yet we are growing the meaningful conversation. So in my presentation today, you can read the letter and see what I'm trying to talk to. I have more questions than answers, to be honest. Is why are we not part of the conversation? How are we, with all the connections we have, not part of these motion moving conversations where if they're declaring something, we should have been aware this is coming and have had a chance to say, before you jump to that ship, how about we look at A, B, C, D, F, G? What have we implemented, copied, learned from, developed, put together? How is it that we are not part of that political action? And the other part that I want to also showcase is I would like to be part of a solution. And the solutions that I've listed in this letter requires a collective approach. And the reason why I use the word collective is, as much as I want to say Zawadi can, and Sean will be laughing at me right now, Sean of Crooked Farms, is there's so much of Zawadi I'm working at closing all those gaps because I see the gaps being done. And most of you should know I am the ask for forgiveness than permission kind of a way, because we need to get things done. And the issue we have with this is I want to present these as an open invitation to all of us to have a way to rely on each other. For example, I don't need to go to every backyard to build a farm. We know somebody who can do a better job. We know somebody in our community who can do a great job. And so I'm asking now that we have these opportunities, we see it. It happened in COVID and it's happening again now. How can we as a community understand what gaps are, but lean on our collective strength? So Zawadi will do what it can, but it can't do it all. And this part is, well, what we live with is Zawadi is trying to create an example. So the Many Hands Collective is an example of multiple farms with multiple iterations of what urban ag could look like. Could be a compost farm, could be a school, could be a YMCA, could be a not-for-profit or a commercial, all of them existing as an ecosystem in one area. Trust me, it's not easy, but it's a needed conversation. How can we learn from those kind of programs and allow us to spread our wings in a way that you don't have to compete against each other, because there's no room for competition, to be honest with you. There's so many opportunities here. I live this with an African saying that says, the sky is big enough for all birds to fly. And this is our opportunity to depend, rely, access, learn from, develop ways to work with each other Because if we go to the city, and when we go to the city, I'm dragging all of you, by the way, if you like it or not, I'm dragging you all with me into that house, because I'm not gonna have all the solutions with me. And Rhonda knows, when I say I'm gonna do it, I do it. So this is all of us. This requires all of us. So it's an open letter. It's an open invitation. If you have any questions, I am a very available individual, and I'm doing everything in my capacity and capability. But here we are. This is our chance, and please, I beg of all of you, this is not a chance to compete. This is a chance to collaborate and build the most incredible food secure city that every word should emulate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jesse. That is just fab. I love getting so excited about people talking collective action, because that is totally what we need. So I want to make sure that we make best use of the time that we have right now. So if people have questions for Jesse, if you have ideas, if there's something that you really want to get behind that you think that we should all focus, please pop your hand up. You can either pop
Maybe,
something in the chat or raise your hand. Sorry, Joe, you wanted to say
well,
something there?
maybe just to help maybe transition, to help tie things up. So I mean, Rhonda has brought up like a list of avenues for action of things that already have are rolling. Jesse's wonderful letter is kind of the most recent step forward. I mean, call. There's the food emergency, which was sprung, from what I understand, even on other food insecurity emergency. Even other councillors apparently were not prepared for it, but it's on the table, and these are all tools that can be used. The advocacy campaign, that with the 150 or so who have taken their time to write to their city councillor, conversations with some of the city staff that are starting to happen, as Rhonda alluded to. So all these that are things that more or less starting to arrive one at a time in parallel. And so question is, here we are in late February, we have more or less a full year ahead of us for the rest of 2025. Where do we go from here? That basically, this is how I would put it. How can we build on these building blocks that collectively and individually have been put forward? And Ali's work of pushing the envelope. I mean, all these elements are building blocks. So just wanted to throw this in, how we can build on all of these pieces, not just the one or two that have emerged so far. And of course, the school food, including the whole potential for around procurement potential, and how urban agriculture can fit as part of that picture as well. So yeah.
Okay,
and economic development as a new, I mean, this is a very exciting opportunity with the changes of economic development, as Josephine pointed out as well.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions here. I just, before we get to Arlene and Ali, Leah, I think your offer to do deputation training is great, because I think we are going to need to mobilize people to get out to city council a lot more. And it really matters that people are residents, not people like me who are seen as like paid lobbyists, even though we're not. And thank you, Jesse, for the many hands linked. Okay, Ali, we'll start with you, and then we'll come back to Arlene's question.
Thanks, Rhonda. I think the lowest hanging fruit here for increasing the amount of land available for farming in an urban environment are the hydro corridors, right? So if you are a farmer outside of the 416 and the 905, and the hydro line cuts through your farmland, you pay hydro on a few $100 a year per acre, and you can go ahead and farm that land contiguously as part of your own operation. The challenge in the City of Toronto is that it's the City of Toronto property, which is managed by Infrastructure Ontario, and Hydro One ultimately sort of has the lease agreement with the city. So there's three parties involved, and I know because I tried to grab the Seneca parking lot. Seneca wants to give up their parking lot, and it's been 18 months of just discussions around. Well, can they even do it? You know, the city has first right to maybe put a park or something there, but if we could focus our efforts on why is it easier for someone who lives outside the 416 and has a farm which is bisected by the hydro corridor to it's a simple form, and the process is so easy with Hydro One, and yet in the city of Toronto it's very complicated. But there's a few thousand acres of land there that is usable, and I know for a fact Toronto Hydro would love not to do vegetation management and cut their expenses there. So there's a lot of win-win situations there if we focused on, they already allow community gardens, but now we're talking about taking it one step further and not displacing those. But, let's add some more scale to that kind of growing environment where all the infrastructure is in place. There's water, there's, everything you need to kind of grow stuff within the limits of what you can do underneath the hydro corridor. To me, that's the number one low-hanging fruit for expanding the amount of land that anybody in the city who wants to be an urban farmer should be able to get.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Ellie. And I think, Brian, you also mentioned hydro corridors. Now, I'm personally very interested in this issue because I spent 7 years of my life getting the agreements for the Malvern Farm and the Flemo Farm. And Elliot is here from Malvern, so maybe, Elliot, you have some thoughts into what happens now that the farms are up and running. But what you said, Ali, from the beginning was very clear to us, was that the city, and Hydro told us this, that the rules are different in the City of Toronto. And I think it's because the population density leads them to think that they can't deal individually with farmers. It just there's no way we can manage that process. The only way we will do it is through the City of Toronto. And so the 7 years of process was trying to get both Hydro One and the City of Toronto to agree to a lease process. I won't get into the details of what a nightmare that was. We did end up with two brilliant farms who are now expanding. Did people know that it's not just the original 2 acres, they're getting bigger. So which is hats off to Malvern and Claire and Orlando and the folks at Food Share for pushing that forward. But what does that mean for more spaces? It was intended to establish those agreements as something that could be done again. But it's not any easier than it was 10 years ago, unfortunately. So, Ali, you called it the low-hanging fruit. I have learned not to say never, because I think in the Seneca situation, I think there's some other spots along the hydro corridor that maybe there will be some food growing coming out of it. But I am thinking that there's much easier stuff moving forward. And the residential lands, I think that's going to be our low-hanging fruit. But we'll all have our own opinions. Okay, Arlene and then Sean. Arlene, you were asking Jessey, what table?
Yeah, so I don't know the inner workings of the city and all its different processes for getting things done. Obviously, Rhonda, you do know a lot more about that. So when we say a seat at the table, I love that idea that absolutely this organization and all the people who are tangential to it should have a seat at the table. What table are we talking about? Who are we talking to? And what's our role? And is that the same question that you're asking, Rhonda, about what ask do we have of the city?
Yeah, because I think we need to have 2 asks. We need to keep going for the staff no matter what, because the fact that this the zoning, the only reason I know about that zoning, even though I do this work all the time, is because Ali has been following it, because that's his business. Otherwise, how do we know about it? We need someone who is focused on urban agriculture, who will identify those moments. When transition TO came through and it was all about climate change, food wasn't on on the radar at all. So there needs to be someone who flags that kind of stuff. So we need that. But that's going to be a longer term thing than I think we originally thought. And we need to get some good solid wins in at the same time. So if we have a school food policy that comes through, we can say, you know what, this would have been a whole lot easier if you had an urban ag expert in-house. All of these things that pile up, we can say, here, this is what we need staff for. This is what we need staff for. So we're saying two things at the same time.
Can I have a
maybe
follow-up?
Yep, follow up.
Okay, so follow up to that. You and James and Joe and TUG are that already existing organization. There was some talk at one point, I remember, of having that person on the inside actually be an organization on the outside. And the fact that you guys are doing all this work and you're not getting paid is ridiculous. Why not have TUG be the voice that connects with the city?
There is more openness to that now than there ever was before. There was outright resistance to the idea of working with community-based organizations. That has been a big shift. So I think we're going to see more of that. Like, for example, Marina Kirolo, who is working on markets. She is now a city staff person working on the inside to move markets forward. So there's hope. There's hope. And Josephine, I think you're saying like tea. Well, and maybe we go for like a bigger environmental organization that can take on that role. But tea has had sort of some work on food, but that's not their main focus. So we want to have folks who are a little bit more about food at the table.
And can I just add to the question of table or tables? Another way to look at it, Arlene, is that so there are, as you know, there is no single table in the city. The city is many tables or silos or whatever. So part of the work is to build things up further, building on some of the friendly climates with some key institutions and key departments. So build up those relationships, continue to push to take those to have more of a kind of seat at their table, in fact. And the other level is that ultimately the big table is city council and the mayor. And so that all kinds of things happen from above. So it's kind of a combination of the tables with kind of within with the staff and so on, as well as push it down from above. And that's where the working with the city councilors. And thanks, Jessey, for just saying, what the heck? Let's go straight for the top. It's not either or, folks. It's all at the same time is what it will take.
That's true. And Josephine, I'm sorry if I misunderstood your comment. Yes, it would be interesting to know what their relationship with the city is. I think they are external and advocating from the outside, but that would be a great conversation to have. So Sean, you've been waiting patiently, and then Jessey, I see your hands up too.
Yeah. First of all, a tip of the hat to Ali for some of the pushing of the envelope work he's been doing, and that research. I think finding cracks and loopholes in the system that exists right now is really important. So I appreciate that effort, and everybody that's pushing envelopes in wherever they are in this big network of networks. A hat tip to you. I think that's great work. The concern I have, and I don't want to be the downer here right off the bat, is this idea of local procurement for school food programs, and the idea that we could even possibly begin to do this with the land base that we have to work with right now. TDSB is massive. TCDSB is massive. To think that we're going to do this with school gardens. I do a school garden project that feeds 30 kids one salad once. You know what I'm saying? And we're talking we're going to do food procurement somehow for a school food program. I think we have to really temper our enthusiasm for this unless, and this is where I'm going with it, we tie Olivia Chow's desire for that school food program to local procurement via the hydro corridors. I think that has to be the
Hmm.
lever to unlock more land. Otherwise, there's no way, and again, I'm at Downsview with some big producers like Jessey, and I know the Malvern space, and these are the biggest places we have in Toronto. Our limit is hundreds of people CSAs kind of thing. It's not thousands of children every single day at TDSB. It's impossible. So, uh, unless if that's something that's really an important part of her legacy, and we want to hitch local procurement to that as an urban agriculture project, then I think that has to be the lever to get many, many, many more lands cracked open for us to farm. And on top of that, then the farmers who can do the work. Because as Jesse pointed out in his presentation, there's a real gap there in terms of available farmers who know how to do it.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to kind of, temper it a little bit. I think we underestimate how much food we can actually grow right now, given even if we're all working at maximum capacity on what we have right now, it can't do it.
It's a good point, Sean, and yes, being realistic, because we will get hit by that question, and we know that, and this is the question that urban agriculture has had to answer for the longest time. Well, can you feed an entire city based on growing in the city? And you can't, and we know that. And the same thing for the TDSB. We're not going to provide snacks for every single school in the city, and let's not even say that we're going to. But I think Jesse points out a really good argument, that you know, collective aggregating produce. A lot of work, a lot of coordination. It would be a big pile of work, but what we could accomplish with that kind of approach, I think, would be far more significant. And yes, this is the way to say, okay, you want to do local procurement for schools. Yeah, you need to free up a lot of land. Hydro corridors, maybe, but there's lots of other city land that is surplus. And I always say spaced because it's not always just about in the ground. Anyway, Jesse, I think you had your hand up there. I see Pei, I see you too. I see Leah.
Yeah, I was going to add on to the question from Arlene about what table are we talking about right now in the city. To Joe's point, there are frameworks being prepared. There's policy reforms being put in. There's city strategies being put into play. But I don't know if any of us are at that seat of where those decisions and drafts and writings are happening. And what I'm saying is we need to have a way to have our voices put in. To Sean's point, absolutely right. And that's why Zawadi is focusing on those major things, is we need to have as many stewards possible. So this requires all schools. I'm talking about not just the TDSP-esque. I'm talking about the Senecas, and all these higher caliber schools, and to equip and teach and open up as much capacity of learning as we can to create land stewards in a higher velocity that we have. The second is the spaces. Yes, we need to have more spaces, but how do we ask for space? We don't have the people to run it, to manage them, to manage to create those conversations. And then once, let's say we have both those two things done, we have the stewards and we have the land. We need to have a way to navigate those food conversations. It doesn't have to be straight from here to market. It could be those food storage capacities, should be those cold storage, dry storage. How do people understand what food is? One of the major challenges with our CSA is you bring a food, the foods that we grow to even the inner city community youth, they will just look at you and say, I don't know what kohlrabi is. I don't know what to do with this. So there's so many gaps to our main aspect of what food resiliency and food access is. And I'm saying this not to say that those gaps are not there. If you look closely in the basket weave of projects around Toronto, there are people solving all those things I just mentioned. So there are chefs who have created a program of an upper profit who can go to schools and teach kids how to cook food. There's there. So there's so many connections to it. My challenge is, as much as the city is thinking this, we need to be part of that conversation and steering committee that directs these reforms and policies and these frameworks as they're in development right now, so that they affect us all as we do what we need. So when that funding comes in, when those opportunities of support from the government coming down and says activate, we are there because we've been doing the work. And that's what I'm hoping that collective mindset could help us develop those opportunities that we can actually develop something that's more life-changing and long-term.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Jessey. So, Petra, I think you're up next, and then I also have Leah here.
Okay. Well, something that was coming up for me, just especially with some of what Jessey just said, is that since TUG is a network in the sense that we're linking local people together doing these similar things around urban ag, is that as we grow and as we become, well, because it's also very important time with where we are with this emergency position of our urban ag, is to start somehow including in conversations and as part of the feed and somehow groups that are also dealing with, other issues that we're tied into, so we become stronger as a woven web, like certain climate issues, or maybe groups like tea, or I don't know if tea is the right example, but climate groups and people who do climate work, that they start thinking about food and certainly soil and agriculture as being a solution, which I don't think they're doing often enough. And also with things like emergency preparedness work groups where food comes in there, and then the preserving comes in, like everything seems to and can overlap and strengthen the whole. And then the other one was waste reduction as an issue, especially around food, because so much of it is thrown out, and the expiry dates. And then the question I submitted was around creating a distribution system, like starting small, of how to avoid food from that's had a certain shelf life but is perfectly good, to redistribute it or make it available to others, like on a larger scale than the fridge standing around or something like that.
Actually, yeah, Petra, you mentioned that in when you registered, you said some questions, and there are actually some organizations that are doing that. And
that's great.
If I have a chance to put it in the chat before we wrap up, otherwise I'll email it out to everyone, because we should all know about the different organizations that are helping to do that that movement around.
And maybe we can get them a part of our feed, like like our little on your list of some people being interested and start cross-sharing that way.
Yeah, I'm seeing this idea about a roundtable coming up. I think there has been some in the past. Like obviously there's been the Toronto Agriculture Program. There was during COVID and a group of people who were working on emergency food during that time. So if it's an emergency now, why not have a table like that? And why not have not-for-profit and community organizations present as well? I think that's an interesting thing to push for. And Petra, you also mentioned that we should be connecting more with climate change groups and environmental groups. And I will say that Brian and Sunday, who are both on the call today, they've carried a really big chunk of that work in terms of trying to get folks who are thinking about climate change. And now that we have Compost Toronto forming as a group, I think that's another group that's going to really push that linkage, because yes, we need to make it. Oh yeah, and James mentioned the Food and Hunger Action Committee. There was funding associated with Food and Hunger Action Committee. It was, yeah, so there's lots of precedent. It's just that's what we need to push for. Leah,
can I just add to
Joe,
this
can you
point,
hang
Rhonda?
on?
Yeah.
Joe, can you hang on for a sec? Because Leah had her hand up and we want to give her a chance to speak. We'll come back to you.
Okay, I'm mostly just bouncing off some things other people have said. So one kind of step-by-step process thing and then one large-scale thing. In terms of what Sean is saying about the the sourcing locally for school food programs, I don't think it's as daunting as all that. If the capacity isn't there, pilot it out, do a demo project. I know exactly how, if it was my job, I would analogize this. I'd say you have a program and what we're doing is the equivalent of Section 37 funding. Here is 10% of your allocation that is going to a community benefit, AKA us. And I think, again, this is a little too anecdotal, but I think the capacity can be there if money is there. I have some colleagues at Scatting, one of whom is trying desperately to launch a microgreens business. And he's floated around some of these consultations as well. I know there are people at Homestead who have been saying outright you can't make a living growing in the city in more than some very narrow restaurant models right now. And that is a barrier. That's something that stops people. So if there's money attached to it, if people have a shot at least making a supplementary living doing this, I think people will start to arrive. There's also an analogous model. Joshna did stuff like this with the hospitals for a little while. Like there's a proof of concept in there. What is being said about coordinating production, to Jesse's point, this is a plus. Like it's a lot of work, but actually, if you turn that around, what's happening is you've just created a local distro job. And, some groundwork for a distro system that's hyper local. You've potentially created more local processing. The food education piece is already happening. I have another friend from Scatting who her day job is she manages some of the stuff with the rooftop garden and some food education at the community center down at the foot of Spadina. And there's not enough hours in it. And she's a wonderful speaker. So that's the small thing. I think when you step it out and pilot it out and just kind of look left, look right, do the thing that Jesse's mentioning of being like, what capacity do we have in all the people who are doing good stuff and not getting paid for it? All of a sudden, a system emerges. But the second thing, this is the hyper ambitious thing, and I'm bouncing off some of the things that were just said about collaboration and finding ways in a roundtable to work together. So I watched a documentary the other week about the Cooper Square Community Land Trust in New York. I don't know if anyone's familiar. It's basically, they were fighting this for 50 years, but Robert Moses wanted to tear down their low-income housing, and they fought it for 50 years and then became a community land trust ultimately. And a lot of how they got that done was they drew up a community-based official plan, like a counter-programming official plan for their neighborhood. This is massively ambitious. I am floating this as a maybe. Would anyone maybe be interested, like, is it an interesting idea to develop sort of an alternate food plan for Toronto, or at least the beginnings of it? Because even if it wasn't something that was used as an advocacy or a policy document, it's a great mapping exercise because then we know what everyone's up to and we all see each other doing our little things in our little corners. And we start to form an integrated picture of what's happening. So I just kind of want to float that out into the ether. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. Lots of great ideas there. And Joe, I want to make sure we come back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually, in relation to the round table or whatever, just for those who weren't around at the very beginning of TUG, but TUG essentially came about the coming together of a bunch of people when the parks, when the city council committee invited a bunch of who became us to talk to the committee about what this emerging urban agriculture thing is. That was the origin. So it's so kind of exposing, essentially educating a number of counselors, collectively finding a moment to bring that about could be another way of doing so, just kind of going back to the origins of that, of where we came from. That basically kind of exposed us to the fact that there were many of us who knew each other, who were doing things, but we didn't have an identity as a group, and that's how what we came Toronto Urban Growers started. Just for a bit of background that might be useful still today.
Yeah, we do have a number of plans that were created and then ended up on shelves because they didn't have teeth to them. So we have lots to start from. There's a lot of ideas that are out there and then just need to be maybe updated a little bit. So I'm looking at the clock now and I'm seeing it's 10 to 8.